Hello everybody and welcome to part 5 of Adventures in XNA. I'm Aardaerimus, and in this segment we will be creating our tiling system. We'll be creating a world screen that we can use with our screen manager, as well as a tile class and a map base. So let's go ahead and get started on that. Before we actually start creating our world screen, I would like to clean up a few items that and mistakes that we made in the first video, that I made actually. In the Game 1 class, where I was drawing my back buffer, and I tried to outline these in the videos with annotations, but just want to make sure that everyone's up to speed here. Where I'm drawing the back buffer to the screen, I'm drawing it to the top left corner, and then I was using the width twice. So what I need to do is make sure that I'm drawing that to the viewport width and the viewport height. So you may have caught that before and already corrected it. And this will also fix that little issue that we had when drawing our menu in part 4. Let's see, I want to go down to my main menu class, and as you can see, we're drawing to 2020 as a correction when it should have been 2080, and it was kind of stretching the fonts a little bit. It's because it was drawing the width twice. So I'm going to change that back to 80 and make sure that looks good. And actually it does, it looks better than it did before. So let's see, there is one other thing that I want to change, and that is in our screen manager. I'd like to go down to the unload sub for our screen manager, and instead of unloading our screens by the screen handle, what I'd like to do is unload it by screen name. So what I'm going to do is change this to a string value, and then I can say if foundscreen.name equals screen. We don't need that little thing there. Then unload it. So we can actually just, push our screen name that we set when we're defining each screen to that unload sub and unload it that way. Alright, so for our tile system, we're going to need 3 separate classes. So that's what we'll be creating here. 2 of those classes will actually define our tile system, and the 3rd class will actually just be a screen that we use to call that tile system. And so that'll be our world screen. I think what I'm going to do here is go ahead and add a new folder just to kind of keep things organized. So I'm going to right-click in my Solution Explorer on the project name and add new folder. I'm going to call this one World. And that's where I'm going to keep my tile class and my map base. And then my 3rd class that I create will actually go in my screens list. May end up deleting this test screen since we don't really need that anymore. Now we'll click on our world folder, and we're going to add 2 new classes here. So we're going to create a tile class. I'm just going to call that tile, and that will store the tile structure data for each tile on our map. It's going to be quite a bit different than I did back in my old GDI series. We're going to actually define each tile individually with its own list of properties and values. So it's a lot more complex, but also a lot better in many ways, because each tile can store numerous data types and properties and stuff. So I'll go ahead and add that, and I will go ahead and add one more class here to the same folder, and this one will be my map base. I'm just going to call that map base. And that will actually be our map definition. And this map-based class may be quite a bit different in a full game. The reason I have to use this differently for the tutorials is because we don't actually have a map editor. So, we'll be defining our map here manually instead of actually using it to import something from a mapping system or a tile editor or something like that. So you'll kind of get the idea of how we're using that and how you can use it in the future for your games. So finally, what we're going to do is go to our Screen Manager folder and into Screens and add a final class. And this one, I'm just going to call our World Screen. And this is where we'll actually draw our map that we create in our map base to our screen and manage our inputs for various subscreens, things like or classes like your character and things like that. So you'll get an idea as we go along there and start creating it, what we can do here. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and save my project here. I want to go back into my tile class. Let's go ahead and define our tile structure. What I'm going to add here first, I'm going to go up out of my class and add an enum group. So I'm going to say public enum, and this is where I'm going to store my tile types. I just want to call it tile type. And I will add to this list a few basic tiles. I'm going to start with grass, and do water, foothills, maybe add mountains. And then I can call on those later on instead of having to grab those differently. Here I'm going to change this class to a structure. So it's just going to be a data structure. It won't be a container or an object like our other classes. So get an error there because it's still a class. I want to set that to structure. So we're creating an empty data structure. We're going to do a public property. And this will be our terrain type as tile type. Okay. So there we can define what type of tile it is, which can be used to dynamically lay out our terrain later on here. So another one, we'll do public property tile GFX as texture 2D. And the reason I'm using this is you may have multiple tile sets in your game that you want to draw from, not all a single graphic like we've used in the past. You may have different terrains and different tile palettes, tile sets that you want to use, so you can create a pointer to those after loading them in your globals. And then, again, dynamically draw based upon that value in your drawing routine. So, next we'll do a public property. This is going to be our source rectangle. So I'm going to say source rect as rectangle. And that will be the rectangle position and size of the slice or image that we want to grab from our tile graphics. So if you have, a tree tile that is 16 by 16, or a tree that's 32 by 32, and you want to grab a specific chunk of that from your tile set, this is what you'll use. Let's see, public property location. This will be the actual location of our tile, where we want to draw it on the screen, as a vector 2. So that'll store our coordinates for our tile. Next step, this is something you may or may not want to use. I'm just going to add it in here, a public property, and I'm going to call this AnyFrame. Sometimes you have tiles that you want to animate, like water and things like that. You may choose different methods of animating those tiles. I just like to store the animation frame or position for later use. So now how about tile actions? You know, triggers or things like that. This is much better than the collision detection that I was using in the past for my tile system. We can store, you know, whether a tile is blocked or not. So it's much easier to, you know, just look ahead and see if that tile is blocked in any position, and then just say, no, you can't move to that. So I'm just going to say tile actions, and I'll do public property is activated as a Boolean. What would an activated tile be? You know, say you have a switch or a lever on a tile and you want your character to flip that switch, you may want to keep track of that. Public property, you know, a lot of these are just ideas that you may want to implement. I may be using these in these tutorials. I know I'll be using the blocked property, so I'll say is blocked as a Boolean. And let's see, what's another one? You could say public property is touch trigger. Okay. You could use this property to say if a tile in front of your character is a trigger, but not necessarily one you would step on. One that you would activate by pressing, you know, like your A button on your control pad, or your, you know, space bar or something. Just want to basically give it an action that you want to evaluate later on in the game. Very handy, great for reading signposts, things like that, though you could also set that signpost as an entity instead and give it its own values, and we'll cover that later in our NPC class. So a lot of different things you can do here. I'm just going to add one more property, and again, these aren't entirely necessary. I just like to, you know, kind of give you ideas of what you can use these for. I'm going to say is step trigger. That's pretty self-explanatory. Unlike the touch trigger, instead of being away from your character or in an adjacent tile, this would be one that you actually step on. When you step on a portal, for example, and you want it to transport you, you would check and see, you know, evaluate whether that tile is a touch trigger, and then what logic lays behind that. You know, do you want it to transport you somewhere? Do you want your character to take damage because you stepped on a spike or a poison tile? All sorts of things you can do there. So that pretty much defines our tile class, and you know, it's not going to have subs and things like that. Instead, we'll just evaluate these properties because it's just a structure of the tile. So I hope that makes sense.